Hey guys, it's Lindsay Coward. This is my project for MPH 521, and I decided to learn more about whooping cough, which is also known as pertussis. So I'll be using those words interchangeably throughout the presentation. Whooping cough is a highly contagious respiratory illness that affects all ages and races. It is an endemic illness in the United States and around the world, despite vaccination efforts. And vaccines are the number one method of controlling pertussis around the world. This illness is highly contagious, as I mentioned. A single index or initial case of whooping cough can produce 12 to 17 secondary cases. The most vulnerable population is babies that are less than 1 year old. And the main reason for this is that babies are typically either unvaccinated or undervaccinated. Since whooping cough has a full vaccine regimen, typically a baby less than 6 months old or even a year old wouldn't have all the vaccines that they need in order to be fully vaccinated. And they can be vaccinated as early as a few weeks to 2 months old, and also can receive antibodies from the mother if the mother is vaccinated during the third trimester. But typically it's not enough coverage for those babies to not get the illness. So the illness, whooping cough or pertussis, is caused by a bacterium, most commonly called B. pertussis, and sometimes it's caused by another bacterium known as B. parapertussis. B. parapertussis typically manifests as the illness, but it's in shorter duration. This illness is highly contagious and is passed from host to host through contact of bodily fluids. So that could be through a cough or a sneeze or a kiss, which is why it's easily passed on from an adult or sibling to a baby in the house. The description of whooping cough, it has 4 phases. The first phase is known as incubation, and it lasts about a week. That second phase is also about a week long, in which a person would have ambiguous symptoms. So that means like it could be sneezing or drippy nose or just feelings of like having a cold or allergies. So most people don't realize at this point, or even during the incubation, that they have pertussis. The third phase is another phase that lasts between 3 to 6 weeks. And this is where we get that cough that we think of with whooping cough. It's a cough of sudden urge with a whooping sound. And sometimes there's also vomiting after the coughing fit. After that third phase comes the fourth phase, which is 3 to 12 weeks long, and it's known as recovery. Individuals are most contagious during the first 2 phases of ambiguity. So during incubation and during those initial symptoms is when people are most contagious and most likely to pass on the illness to family or people that they're working around. This poses a health threat because it can be passed on before an individual knows that they have something other than a common cold or allergies. So along with that condition, babies actually have the most severe symptoms out of all age groups, and that includes symptoms such as apnea, pneumonia, pausing during breathing, seizures, abnormally slow heart rate, and even death. So that's another reason why the babies less than a year old is the most vulnerable population, just because the illness manifests in such a more severe way than the average adult. China and the United States had the highest number of reported cases of pertussis in 2018 when compared to other countries across the globe. China had 22,057 cases, and the United States had 18,975 cases. And just remember that these are reported cases, so there could have been others that were under or unreported. Of those 18,975 cases in the United States, 2,031 of those were in babies that were less than 1 year old. The thing with this is that it may not be a huge distribution of the incidence of cases, but if you look at the next statistics here, 42.35% of those cases in babies that are less than 6 months old were hospitalized. Where if you look at other age groups, we see a lot lower hospitalization rate, anywhere from like 5% or less. And then 11.9% of those cases in babies between 6 and 11 months old were hospitalized. And we may see a reduction there between that about 42% to about 12% of the second half of a baby's life, just because most babies by 6 to 11 months old would have received at least one round of vaccination for whooping cough. Some current hypotheses from the research: vaccines are waning in strength over time. We see that babies are catching pertussis from siblings and parents. The bacterium is evolving and becoming resistant to current medication and vaccination. So currently it is, or pertussis is, like when someone gets pertussis, they're given an antibiotic. And we've seen in the United States, as well as other countries such as France, that there are some cases of pertussis in which the bacteria is resistant to the antibiotic that is typically prescribed. And when we talk about evolving with reference to vaccination, there's actually two different types of vaccinations. There's the acellular vaccination, which is the more common one now, and then before that was the whole cell vaccination. So there's two different vaccines that are going around as far as being distributed across the globe in order to help prevent the spread of pertussis, especially among those babies that are most vulnerable. Continuing with the current hypothesis, there's a thought that individuals are not staying up to date with their vaccine regimen. So that vaccine regimen is a long process. It can start at early as pregnancy, and then for babies they can get vaccinated every couple months when they're first born. And then there's also boosters for preschoolers, and then again as teenagers, like going to college. And then again as adults as well. So if people aren't keeping up with their vaccine regimen, either that vaccine is waning in strength so that the person is still able to contract the illness and then pass it on, or there's just been so long since they had a vaccine that they just don't have the proper antibodies that they need. Other hypotheses include genetics and surveillance and monitoring. And that includes just tracking whooping cough or pertussis illnesses. It's not always tracked at a clinical level. People don't always get tested for it. They think they have a cold and they don't realize that it could be something more drastic for the vulnerable populations. So some gaps in knowledge in the research. I put some things here that weren't really disclosed or was inconclusive, and that's if there's any variability among gender or race and ethnicity or even geographic location. There is information by state and by county, but it's not necessarily broken down by, oh, we live in a more wet climate, so we see more cases of whooping cough. There's nothing about climate in reference to whooping cough. The main thing with geographic location is that in areas where there is under vaccination or limited vaccines, that they do see more cases of pertussis coming up. But those areas that are highly vaccinated are also seeing cases pop up more frequently. This has to do with the variability in vaccine strength and uptake. So are people actually getting their vaccines? Are they sticking to their regimens? Which vaccine is working better, the acellular one or the whole cell one? Another option here, or gap in knowledge, is information about cocooning as a method of protection. And cocooning is the idea that if individuals that are around infants get vaccinated, so those siblings, the grandparents, the parents, that they can create a barrier for those infants that are too young to yet receive the vaccine. And there's not a ton of information on the scientific validity of this, but it is something that is recommended and has been seen to help. Also, cyclical or seasonal nature of pertussis. I saw variability in research here. Some places said there's no cycle. Also, others said every 3 to 5 years there's another outbreak. So it's just a question of what is the cycle and what can we do about it. And suggestions for further research. More information about antibiotic resistance, so testing at the clinical level for the resistance of the current bacteria that are showing up when people come in with whooping cough. Learning more about cocooning and information on current vaccination guidelines, and making sure that parents with young children and babies know that information and know where to get their vaccines. More research on the waning of vaccination strength and which vaccine is more effective, that acellular or the whole cell vaccine, in terms of keeping the babies as healthy as possible, but also keeping the overall prevalence and incidence of pertussis low across the globe. Understanding where babies are contracting the illness. It shows that family members are probably the most commonplace. So then what can we do about that? Learning more about cocooning and vaccine guidelines. More research should also be conducted in terms of geographic location, variability among ethnicities and races, genders, and other demographic differences such as SES. And then also, lastly, that cyclical nature of pertussis. What is it? Does it go along with the beginning of the school year? Does it go along with vaccines waning over a couple-year period? What is its cyclical nature, and how can we control it? These are my resources for my project, and I look forward to any questions or comments in the discussion board. Thank you.